All right. Hey there, everybody. Hope your week is off to a great start. Today, we're going to be focusing on a topic that I think is really huge and impactful. And it's about how our belief and our perception is influencing our reality on a day-to-day basis. And the reason why I bring this up is because the concept that Henry Ford, he had a saying, and this is something I truly believe in, and this is why I sparked the whole idea for this conversation. It said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. I'll say it one more time. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So this gets to the whole concept of what we believe actually influences our perception and our reality. And I think this is something that is so fundamental, but we often don't realize just how it truly impacts us on a day-to-day basis. In recent years, books like The Secret or The Magic or anything of that nature has contributed to the idea that if we wish for something to happen, essentially, it can be granted through visualization and positive thinking. And while great concept, it's like, okay, does this really work? And I think that overall, when you look at the scientific data, there is, it does work, it just is a little bit different than how the books describe. So I want to get into what the actual components of it are that I think are a little bit more reality, actual based than the scientific part of it versus what necessarily the books describe, which I think the books are great because it teaches you tools and things like that as far as how to implement things. So I'm not knocking those. I've actually read several of them, so I'd recommend any of them. Um, but before we can jump into how beliefs and such impact our life, we have to understand what they are. So beliefs are assumptions that we hold true, and they stem from our real life experiences. So we tend to think that our beliefs are founded in reality. However, it's our beliefs that govern our experiences and therefore shape our reality. We hold them as a critical and essential part of who we are, our identity, essentially. And they're usually classified into two main groups, rational or irrational. And so beliefs are incredibly important, which then gets to what are values? How are they different? Values are the principles, qualities, and standards that we hold in high regard, which obviously are beliefs uh, help us define our values. Um, so they guide our core values, or guide the way that we live our lives, essentially, and then therefore shape every single decision that we make. So these can be defined as essentially something that we consider to be a worthy, a worthy cause is something that we value. For some people, it's the environment. For other people, it's healthcare. For others, it's something entirely different. And so that's where all of us are different. Our values are different. And that's based off of our beliefs of something that we hold to be true. So if someone values the protecting the environment, they believe that protecting the environment is important because of whatever reason. Um, so this is where our values can have a significant impact on what we decide to do every day. And common values are something that are shared by a particular group of people, community, or like it could be an entire culture. Um, and the late Louis Rath, who is a professor at New York University back in the 1950s, he did a ton of research that focused on how people came to hold certain beliefs and values. And he actually defined it as having seven um, processes, essentially, that lead us to believing a certain thing and obviously having a certain value associated with it. And so we consciously choose our beliefs and therefore our behaviors that come thanks to those beliefs, which we'll get into behaviors in just a second, um, freely, which is number one, usually from various alternatives, which is number two, after careful consideration of the consequences of each choice. That's number three. We honor and uphold our beliefs and behaviors by internally cherishing them, which is number four, and being prepared to stand up for them publicly, which is number five. And we live according to one's beliefs by doing something with that choice, which is number six, and acting on the value repeatedly. That's number seven. So this doesn't necessarily tell you, what to believe. It's just how we form that process of our beliefs and our values. So we usually start by having a choice of some kind. And then we make a decision based off the information we have available at the time. And then we take that decision and we defend it and we cherish our decision. And then we do something to keep going down that path of that choice. Um, so by acting repeatedly. And this is where we get to behavior. Behavior in this sense refers to a lasting group of beliefs, feelings, and tendencies directed towards a particular idea, object, or a group of people. So this is where our beliefs and our values influence our behavior. And our attitude is triggered by a belief about something. So essentially our action is triggered by our belief about whatever it is. So for instance, if going back to the environmentalist who believes that it's important to protect the environment because they value it, because they think, that our environment is important for us as a human being race to survive, might actually take action to support that belief. So whether it's supporting a specific environmental cause, maybe they volunteer their time and, do cleanups on the side of the road, something like that. And so this is where you can start to see how what we believe affects what our values are, which therefore then affects what we do. And that's just one, very small example. There's many other examples, obviously, that influence us on a day-to-day basis. So when it comes to perceiving our reality, the big thing is our five senses. They are incredibly important because that's how we, process what's going on in our environment. And so our brain, responds to by helping us recognize, categorize, and then respond to what's going on in our environment, usually through our five senses. So even before we consciously become aware of what's going on around us, our brain has this filtering process. And it starts to filter out the things that, it filters out the things that don't match our beliefs, and then feeds to us consciously what it is we already believe. And so this is where we can see our beliefs become so ingrained that we aren't even aware of it, and our brain's automatically processing things to go along that same vein. So this is how it starts to shape our reality. And because of the idea that, yes, it's going through that filtering process, if we're not making a conscious effort to be aware of our beliefs, then we're not even aware when something might be contradicting it initially. And we're going to get into that here in a moment. But there's a couple other things that influence our beliefs. And one of them, besides obviously our five senses and our environment, is early relationships, experiences, and events or situations that all impact our belief system. And this is because they help our brain to predict the next sequence of events according to our thoughts. And the best way to look at this is through an example. So for instance, as a child, and this is one that is commonly used by many researchers, is that you come upon a dog. And depending on, if you've never met a dog before, either the dog's going to be nice and happy and you're going to pet the dog and you're going to be like, oh, dogs are great. Or if the dog happens to be, bites you, you're going to now be fearful of dogs. And therefore, the next time you encounter a dog, you're going to be like, dogs are mean, they're going to bite me. And so you try to avoid dogs. And so right there, that's past experience that carries forward. So, the next time you encounter a dog, if you're the first person, you're going to be like, oh, these dogs are great. You're going to want to go pet the dog. And then versus the other person is going to do everything possible to avoid petting the dog or being around the dog because they're afraid they're going to get bitten again. So this is how our experiences can help define our belief system. So that's one aspect of it. Obviously, part of past experiences are emotions. Emotions are huge as far as when they, impact what we tie to past experiences, but also in the moment. How are you feeling in the moment? Typically, if you're feeling unhappy, if you're feeling down versus feeling happy or, excited about something, that can affect how we perceive a current situation. If you're feeling happy, you're going to be like, yeah, this is great, and versus if you're feeling down, you're like, yeah, man, this really sucks. So that's where it's like, okay, I've got to, you know, you think about how you're feeling in the moment emotion-wise, in addition to, your past experiences influencing your beliefs, your senses, and then there's a couple other things as well. So there's a lot that goes on into this whole process of creating our belief system, which creates us. Um, Motivation is huge. When you feel that you can do something, you're going to more likely achieve it because of that perception that you can do something. Versus if you're thinking that you can't, then you're more likely to not achieve it because of the fact that you believe you can't. Um, and then there's a couple other things that I'm going to touch upon that do influence how we believe things. One is exposures to other people's beliefs and realities, because this can alter our own perception. And then obviously certain personality traits. Some people are more optimistic versus others being more pessimistic. And that can influence your belief system significantly. Also certain bodily or physical conditions, because it can impact how your brain processes things. Another factor is that the presence of others. So think of it this way. Have you ever been nervous about something, stressed out, and you call a friend on the phone or you meet with them in person? You explain the situation, you talk to them about it, and then they help give you a new perspective and then you feel better. And so this is where, I mean, the opposite can also be true. Something happens, the person, you talk to somebody and they're negative about it, then, maybe you don't feel better. So this is where the concept of, other people comes into play. And that's just one part of it. Another huge part, and this is been since about the 1930s, there was a hypothesis put out that your beliefs are also influenced by your language and your culture. The two main ideas is that the language you speak determines the way you interpret the world around you, and the language you speak influences your beliefs about the real world. And this gets to the cadence of language and linguistics and all of that. So I'm not going to dive into that. That's a whole different rabbit hole. But just know that subsequent studies in the 1980s actually confirmed this theory, that language is a part of belief. So there is some influence as far as where you come from, what languages you speak, as far as how you're going to believe certain things. Part of it's probably cultural, because obviously we know that culture impacts our belief system. But so all of these things put together, that's what causes us to believe certain things, have certain values, and therefore define our reality. And this gets into the concept of your own personal reality, because what is real for me is different from what is real for you. And this is the idea that we all have our own personal reality, and none's really wrong, none's really right. It's just what we define as what's right or wrong for us. And so gets to the concept of every single decision that we make starts with a belief. It starts with something that we believe. And therefore, it's important to realize that sometimes, though, what we believe isn't true. And this is because of the idea that of the way our brain processes things, and that whole filtration process. Sometimes when we're taking in information, our five senses can't fully perceive, have full awareness of everything that's going on around us. Sometimes there's just too much information. You can't get all that information in. And then just the human tendency, we sort of ignore the situational forces that shape our behavior. So we sort of ignore everything else that I just described. And so this is where we sort of attribute our behavior to the way I am instead of to the situation I am in. So we associate our behavior as a actual thing that's us versus being in the relation to the actual situation that we're in. And so, or our response to the situation that we're in. Essentially, that means obviously we are in control of our behavior, even if we don't necessarily think that we are. So when we're trying to, if nothing's improving in a situation, then we sort of conclude that things aren't going to change, it's not working, and then lose confidence in the ability to be able to change that. But this is where it becomes so key to examining our beliefs, bring them to that conscious level. So we're actually aware of them, and then we can make more informed decisions. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to change your beliefs. This just means being aware of your beliefs, being aware of what you value. So that way you make sure that the decisions you're making are in line with those. And sometimes, yes, you might need to change them if you find that what you believe is no longer true for your reality. Um, and so this is why it's really important to go in depth on understanding these core values in your belief system. Another big factor here is that our negative instincts, we're just more likely to look for the bad in situations. That's just human nature. So this is where it takes, actual effort as far as looking at your belief system and look for the positive stuff. And this is where the books like The Magic, The Secret, The Power, all of them, that's what they're designed to do, is to help you do that, to help you look for those positive things. Our fears that we have tend to become self-fulfilling prophecies. When you look for the negative, you're going to find the negative. When you look for the good, you'll find the good. And this is why it's so important to actually think about what vibes are you putting out there, essentially. What are you looking for in the universe? Not just, specifically, but in general. And because of the fact that, we typically as humans ignore anything that's contrary to our belief system. Part of that's the filtration process. Part of it is that if it doesn't support what we believe, we're going to ignore it. So this is where you need to, start looking at your beliefs because we know that it impacts our behavior. So when you believe that you're capable, competent, and deserving of something, you're going to be more likely to notice and seek opportunities that go in line with that. And the opposite's true. If you don't, then you're not going to see those opportunities. And this is the same thing with health. Studies have found that people who have positive beliefs about aging have a tendency to live about 7.5 years longer than those who don't. Another great example of this is the placebo effect. I mean, we all know what that is, where, somebody is given a sugar pill instead of the actual medication, but they don't know that, and they think they've got medicine, and then they start to get better. And this is why it can be incredibly hard when they're doing scientific studies on new medications. Is it the placebo effect? Why do people who are not getting the medicine actually do better? And that's the whole concept of if we believe something, then it can actually change physiologically certain processes within our body. And this gets to the whole concept of belief and mindset and how influential it can be. And obviously, when you believe certain things, you can shape your environment. For instance, think of your reaction with other individuals in your life. As I mentioned before, when you're stressed out and you call a friend or family member and they help you feel better just by talking through your problem and giving you a new perspective, that's great. But your behavior influences others as well. Think of it this way: when you view your romantic partner in a more positive view, what is the outcome? How do they respond to you in that regard versus how do they, if you were negative about it, how would they respond to you in that? And that's where your behavior influences others' behavior, which therefore then defines your reality in a certain way. And so to me, this is, it's all this interplay of back and forth of everything that we all have going on in our lives that's completely influenced everything that goes on. So what we need to keep in mind here is that what we put out, as far as we're always going to attract those experiences that match our existing belief systems. So if you want to have different experiences, you need to change your belief system. And so this can be incredibly hard to do. The more ingrained your beliefs and your values are, certain things, they are harder to get rid of because we're going to continually find evidence to support that. We just have to realize that the majority of these beliefs aren't necessarily true. They're only true because we've decided that they're true. So that's where questioning and understanding that, yes, we need to examine them to make sure that they are still true for us. And that doesn't mean that they're true for someone else. It's just that that's our truth, our reality. Um, and so, but the good news is about personal beliefs is you can change them. It just takes awareness. We need to be aware of what we believe. And the first thing you have to do when to create awareness is think of any significant events that have shaped your life and have, you have to think of what your values are, think of what your beliefs are, and then think of events that led to what you believe in that. So if you believe a certain thing, well, why do you believe that way? Was it something that happened as a child? What was your experience with that? And then think through, is that an actual truth or is that just that one particular experience? And, have you changed since then? Has your life moved in a direction that is no longer a true belief for you? And this can be incredibly hard because a lot of our core beliefs are buried deep in our subconscious. So it takes a little bit to become aware of those things. Some people find it helpful to do meditation, um, but the best way once you become aware of changing them is to start challenging your beliefs. And so you're actually looking for evidence that contradicts your beliefs and question everything that you think is true. This doesn't mean you question it to the point you just like throw it out and you don't live by it anymore. It's like, but understand that, okay, I believe this. Is this true? Let me take a look at what other evidence there is. And a great example of this, and I think part of the way we live in society nowadays, thanks to obviously social media, regular media, all the other information out there, is we are so in our own little bubble, if you will, because of all this social media. When you look something up, I mean, the internet's amazing. I look something up on my phone, I go onto my laptop to do something, and I'm getting served up ads for the item or something similar that I looked up to on my phone. And so the algorithms and all these other things that they have in place, I mean, it's amazing, the technology. But I think what it's doing is we are getting served our stuff that we're interested in, and we're not being able to be exposed, if you will, to other viewpoints. And this is having an effect, essentially, where we are getting to the point that by not being exposed to other viewpoints, I mean, think of back in the day when people would actually read physical newspaper. There's information in there, right, that it was, more than just what we're interested in. And if you actually took the time to read it, or we actually took the time to talk to somebody who's not in our friend group, maybe you're in line at the grocery store and waiting and had to strike up a conversation with the person next to you just because you're standing there because we didn't have our phones to look at, that you get exposed to things that we don't nowadays because we are getting served the things that we're interested in. And so what this is doing is just reinforcing this belief system that we have that what I believe is right, and therefore, and it's also becoming very hostile in that what everybody else believes is wrong. And that's, to me, part of the issue we're, I think, seeing in our society is this issue with the belief systems of people clashing with each other versus us being more open to the idea that, just because I believe something doesn't mean that somebody else believes it, and doesn't necessarily mean what they believe is wrong either. It's just that that's true for them and what I believe is true for me. And maybe sometimes you find something new that does change your belief system. But without being aware of our belief system and then without questioning our belief system, we can't even get to that point of having a conversation with others because of the fact that it just is such a struggle to be able to challenge our own belief system that we're not open to that now. Whereas before, I think we sort of realized that yes, there were other people, and we did a better job of understanding. Yeah, we believe something, but our neighbor down the street doesn't, and that's okay. And we still interact with them. So that's where once we know what we believe, then we question what we believe, and then we have a thorough understanding of why we believe that, and then we can identify the things that are our limiting beliefs. And so this is where we can start to change those. And you want to define yourself based on what you want to believe in, not what you've already believed in. Obviously, just if there's stuff that you truly value and you're going to continue to believe in that, that's perfectly fine. It's the idea, though, that we have to be aware enough and make a conscious decision to make that former belief or new belief part of who you are. And part of this is just engaging in practices that encourage you to be open to things like that. And so, mindfulness meditation, keeping a gratitude journal, you know, think of all the things that you're grateful for. Write them down. Every day I sit down and I write down, this is thanks to the book The Magic, write down 10 things that I'm grateful for, whatever it is. You know, it can be big, can be small, can be whatever I think of that day. And it's just opens you up to a whole new way of thinking as far as, yeah, I've got all these awesome things going on in my life. You feel better. So I encourage you to do the same. Um, and then for each day, set clear intentions of how you want to approach the day. And then make an effort to align your behavior with those intentions. Obviously, there's going to be times that you're not necessarily fully aligned. That's okay. That's a learning experience. That's what we are put on this earth to do, is to learn. Um, so key things with this is don't create an uphill battle for yourself. You know, you set things in motion so that way you're starting at the top and you're going downhill. Make it easy. Give yourself a push at the beginning of the day. Um, for us individually as humans, we just don't feel comfortable to act one way and think another. It just doesn't feel good. So this is where you have to start putting in place small steps that are going to align you with that thought process that you want to have, and then just keep going, you know, one thing after another, and it's going to move down that path, down that slope. And so the big thing is when the gap between what we say and what we do narrows, that's when tough decisions become easier. And it's important to realize that decisions should be based on our core values, especially important decisions, right? And then core values is really that intersection between what we believe and how we behave. So that is where you have beliefs, values, and behavior all together. And that's where I think something that we often don't give enough thought to. And that's why it's so important to understand that while your perception is going to create and affect your life, because your belief literally changes your perception. In your perception, will change and your reality changes. All of these things interplay together. Um, and we have to realize that our beliefs and our values are going to change with time. That's natural. I mean, they should. As we continue to mature and grow and learn, we gather new information. And that's just part of life. And so we have to incorporate that new information and decide, you know, is it something that I value? Is it something I don't? Has it changed anything that I believe? And then that's, you know, as part of a overall life process, it's so key. And that's why most successful people actually challenge their beliefs every day. And that is something that I think is truly important. It's, you know, it's not to make it hard work every day as far as, you know, challenging your core beliefs. It's the idea that, okay, did I learn something today that changes how I believe about anything? If not, what did I learn today? And is it something that I completely disagree with? Is it something that I'm in complete agreement with? Or is it just something, you know, that it's new information, I take it in and it's in there, so that way at some point in the future, if I get further information, it changes something. And this is where it's being open to the idea of learning, being open to the idea of changing our belief system is so key. And this is the bottom line of this whole thing, is that just because you've always believed something doesn't mean you can continue to have to believe it. And I think that's one of the best things about being human beings, is that we have the opportunity to define our lives as far as our beliefs, our values, our behavior. Remember, our behavior is what makes us a better person, not our beliefs. How we act on our beliefs, that's basically who we are. But we can't even determine that if we don't know what our beliefs and our value system is. So thank you guys for sticking with me today. And until next week, I know it's going to be Christmas week, so we'll probably do the Facebook Live event a little bit earlier in the week, so that way everyone can enjoy their holidays. But until then, I will see you guys and stay healthy.